Line tougher controls on COVID vaccine exports as a number of European countries are faced with a third wave of coronavirus infections. The measure could limit vaccine exports to countries like Britain, which produce some of their own vaccines, but according to the EU, do not send a similar number of doses to the EU. Here's a European Commission Vice President outlining the new rules a short while ago.
Going forward, Member States and Commission should now consider two additional elements when assessing the impact of planned exports. First, reciprocity. If the country of destination, which has a large production capacity, restricts its own exports of vaccines or substances, either by law or by other means, it may be appropriate to consider whether exports to this country are justified. The second element is proportionality, which means finding the right balance. Member States and the Commission will consider the conditions prevailing in the country of destination, in particular the epidemiological situation, its vaccination rate and the existing availability of COVID-19 vaccines.
OK, let's go straight to our Nick Beek, who joins me from Brussels. Nick, after days of threats, now a proper formal proposal.
That's right, Yelda, and we still actually don't quite know how this is going to work in practice. Certainly there was lots of information that we were given today. We know that in broad terms the European Union says that the big pharmaceutical companies need to treat the European Union and its citizens much fairer. They need to do a lot more to ensure that contracted doses are being injected into people's arms. And so as part of this, as we heard there, it was quite technical, wasn't it, some of it, but the idea is that Commission officials will now look at the country where any shipment is supposed to go from one of the 27 EU countries, and they'll look at the COVID rate there, how the cases are progressing, whether they're going up or going down, also the rate of vaccination. And this is interesting because it could affect countries, including the United Kingdom, where the vaccination rollout is 4 times quicker, it would seem, than many EU countries. Officials here, you know, they deny that this is targeting the United Kingdom or AstraZeneca, the British-Swedish company, but certainly this all takes place under the shadow of this ongoing row between the EU and AstraZeneca, and so there could be a knock-on impact, potentially for other manufacturers as well, if these tighter measures are really sort of brought in this way.
Meanwhile, Nick, I mean, it's hard to underestimate the damage that this has done to public trust.
Yes, I mean, there's a real problem here, Yelda. You've got the Commission talking really tough about getting the vaccines it's been promised, but we know there are millions of the AstraZeneca vaccine, millions of doses that are simply not wanted, it would seem, in Europe at the moment, and that's because we've seen the rise in public scepticism. Last week, of course, there was a temporary pause in the rollout of that jab because there were health fears, and then the EU regulators said actually there was no problem, and on the basis of probability, when you look at the risks, the benefits greatly outweigh any sort of risks, and people should be using this to try and protect themselves from coronavirus. But yeah, that certainly shook public health. So on the one hand, you've got people unwilling to take this vaccine, but also the European Union and the Commission in particular pushing very hard to get as many vaccines as possible to try and fight this third wave that sadly it would appear that we are seeing here in the EU.
Nick, thanks so much for bringing us up to